Hi there, it's Jane, and in today's video I want to show you some art supplies that I've been using. This video has been requested for a long while. I'll just make it simple and we'll try to show you what I'm using, what I have in here. Because in this brush case I have all the brushes that I am satisfied with and tried and they worked for me. Brushes, they are probably the hardest thing to buy online, at least for me personally. And for somebody like me who lives in a small town with no art supplies stores nowhere around where I could actually see them and try them for myself, it's very hard. I often end up purchasing a brush that looks like it should work, but it does not work. Some of these brushes that I'm gonna show you, maybe you won't be able to get them. Some of them are only available in my country or in Czech Republic. If that's the case, then I'm very sorry, but the purpose of this video is just to show you what I've been using, and I'm gonna try to tell you with every brush type why does the particular material work for me, so that you maybe get a better idea of whether you should try to get something that's similar. First of all, the brush case. It's been so helpful to have these brushes in my brush case. Let's open it now. It has a zipper all around. You can immediately see that it's sturdy enough to keep your brushes protected from harm. Before I had a brush case, I was transferring them just like I threw them in my backpack, and I managed to damage some of my brushes this way, and that's why I got the case. It was not completely inexpensive, and these type of things are hard to find in Slovakia, and so I usually shop in Jackson's Art Supplies. It's been very hard for me to shop there anymore because of the fees that's changed after Brexit. If you are looking for something similar, you should definitely try and look at the art supply store that's closest to you and support your local art supply stores if they have something like that. And these are all my brushes. Here I try to have my main watercolor round brushes that I usually paint with. Here are my flat brushes, and here are the brushes that are detailed or synthetic, a bit lower in quality than the real watercolor brushes on the left side, but the synthetic brushes such as these come in handy when creating details, which I'm gonna mention. In the watercolor mini-series that I created for you a couple of months ago, I had an episode about art supplies that I would recommend you to get when you're starting with watercolor, and this is definitely not the amount of brushes that you need. When you're starting out with watercolor, you're usually good to go with 2 or 3 brushes, one round that is larger and one of these really cheap synthetic brushes, and you can paint 95% of paintings I could paint with those 2 brushes or the 2 types of brushes. So why do I have so many? It was mostly my curiosity to try them out. Some of them I bought when I was traveling. Some of them I ordered because other painters were using them and I wanted to try them out because I thought that my brushes did not work with that particular technique that I've been trying to teach myself. So that's why I have so many, but they do have different properties. I use all of them. They are for different occasions. There is 1 or 2 brushes that I reach for much more often than for others, and I will get to that later. The largest brush that I have is this one, is Da Vinci Mix B. So that's a mixture of squirrel hair and synthetic hair. The mixture of natural and synthetic hair, they perform almost as great as the natural hair, but they should be a bit cheaper. And with these watercolor brushes, the larger it is, the more hair it contains, the more expensive it is. And let me tell you, the price for one of these can go up to 50 euros or so. Prior to this brush, my largest watercolor brush was this one that I no longer carry around, and this is Art Secret number 12. I think this is pure squirrel hair. When I'm painting with them, I don't see much of a difference. They were insanely expensive and I only use them sometimes. The opportunity usually comes with a larger sized painting, and usually it's the background that I fill with these. You should buy this only if you have an extra budget. This is not a necessity. It also takes some time for a watercolor painter to feel confident enough to create large paintings, large enough to actually need one of these. Then there are these 3 brushes. Believe it or not, if you pay close attention to the bristles, you might not even notice that they are synthetic because they are so soft. But these brushes, they're called Kazan. These are synthetic hairs that try to mimic natural bristles for a watercolor brush. They really work very well. They can absorb a lot of water. Why I noticed them mostly was also because of their price. The price was almost half what even like a mixture type of brush would cost. For example, the size of number 0 is quite large. This is what you would call a larger round brush in watercolor, and it only costs about 10 euros here in Slovakia. I do usually recommend this to my Slovakian students to purchase as one of the first watercolor brushes. However, when the brush is wet, I made the brush wet now, it can fill larger areas very quickly, but the tip is not too sharp and you won't be able to get as many details with it as with the natural brush that I'm gonna show you later. But regarding its ability to create a watercolor wash, it performs really nicely. Another type of brush, they're called Fontaine, and I have them here in 3 sizes, and these are also synthetic brushes. They're much more sturdy than the Kazan ones, and so they do not try really to mimic the typical watercolor bristles so much, but with them being a little bit stiffer, they can be insanely precise. They still have a soft touch, so they won't damage the paper. They have a sharp tip and they can be much more precise, so the painting experience with these is quite interesting. So this is what the wet brush looks. And this is a large one. Number 4 is a really large brush, so you can fill in larger areas, but I would not quite use it for that purpose only because Kazan would do a better job at this. This is not as much water as Kazan can hold, but look at the sharp tip. With such a large brush, you can even draw a very, very thin line if you wanted to, and so you can be insanely precise if you want to fill an area. They do come in handy, and especially this large brush, I have a specific use for it, and it really has its place in my collection. Let me show you the smaller ones. This one is fantastic. Like, the brush is so sharp. It is as sharp as the typical synthetic brush would be, but at the same time holds much more water because the bristles are something in between the typical synthetic sturdy bristles and watercolor soft bristles. Working with this brush is a really nice experience. Now, this is a typical watercolor brush. I bought it in England. It wasn't cheap. It's the typical universal round watercolor brush. I think it's pure squirrel. So it can hold a lot of water. Beautiful. Performs even better than Kazan, but since the bristles are natural, they usually hold a very nice tip, and so you also should be able to write with it or create thin lines. If you only have to pick one and you'll never have another brush for your paintings, you should get something like this. Then I have like these 2 specific types of brushes that I bought out of curiosity, but you can notice that they are smaller. The majority of my time on a painting are done with these brushes. Escoda brushes, which is a really nice brand, and I really like their brushes. These are the ones that I use in my studio. They were not cheap. I think I will find the link somewhere to Jackson's Art Supplies where I bought them. I will try to put that in a description of this video so that you can check the price, but I don't remember it. And they're really nice. They're supposed to be natural Kolinsky hair in these two brushes. They hold a lot of water but also create a sharp tip that will be great for details. And these are the silver black velvet brushes. You might have seen these all around YouTube because a lot of painters are using them, and I actually ordered them because I saw other painters use them. The brush has a very unique hairstyle, I'd say, and I want to see how that works. And so first I purchased the number 6 and then later on the number 8, and the moment I got that brush in my hand, it's such an experience. And I think that it's because the brush, there is this very specific cut that makes the brush so sharp, and it can fit anywhere. It can create details, but it also holds a lot of water. It's much sharper than other regular watercolor brushes. Let me show you. Number 4 I bought as my first silver black velvet brush, and I've been painting with it for about a month, like non-stop. I don't think I've grabbed another brush that month, but I was a bit disappointed after 30 days. I know that I've been using it a lot, but bristles of the brush were no longer holding the previous form as well. You know, when you are painting something detailed and your brush splits and you are not able to get a consistent line, then that's something that's making me really nervous. And I'm not saying that this is a bad brush. I was hoping that it will hold for more, because what I like about natural hair bristles is that those brushes usually hold for longer. You don't have to replace them as often as when you are using the synthetic hair type, because the synthetic ones usually split and then you have to throw them away, but natural hair were supposed to hold longer. So I was a bit disappointed, but I checked with some of my friends that has been using the same brush. They did not experience this, so it might have just been a bad batch, I don't know. But yeah, that was something that happened, so I do not use the 6 for as much anymore. But with the number 8 that I bought a bit later and have been using often ever since, I did not experience the same thing. It still can hold the form very well, so I just assumed that the number 6 might have been faulty. These two are by far one of the most favorite brushes of mine. I've been using them more often than other types of brushes. I love them. I recommend them, and the great thing about them is that you can get them worldwide. And here are my flat brushes. I do not use them as often. I usually use them for landscape paintings, but I do not do landscapes as often. Sometimes I use the flat brushes to make flat strokes that have a decorative purpose, so these brushes do not get a lot of love from me. I use these with gouache as well. This is Princeton. And in England I bought the Pro Arte that's flat and with natural bristles, but I also do not use this often and it was quite expensive. It's a nice brush. I'm just not painting architecture so much, and with portraits I usually prefer round brushes. As good and nice as it is, it would really deserve a better owner that would have a better use for it, but I don't at the moment. These both are flat brushes with very similar bristles than the Fontaine ones, because these are also Fontaine brushes. What's great about these is that I find them insanely similar in quality than Winsor & Newton Cotman brushes. From my point of view, these are the same brushes, but this is like 1/3 of a price. Usually I just use them for gouache paintings, for gouache studies, and for landscape painting, so not often, but I still like to have them at hand in case I will need them. Same goes for this one. It's also just a gouache brush. and it's something synthetic cheap that's like nameless. I'm sorry, I won't be able to tell you who is actually making this brush, but I know for sure that this is something that I did not pay more than 2 euros for. From the same brand, Simply Tea or Tea Brush, I have synthetic brushes. These usually cost about €1 or €1.50. And I use them to create details. They have the typical synthetic sturdy bristles in them, but these brushes, they do need to be switched every now and then because the tip tends to go completely messed up, and I feel sad when I have to throw a synthetic brush away. I usually don't actually throw them away. I just put them aside so that kids can use them. If you paint with this type of brushes, you will have to every now and then get a new set. What about this brush? It's also tea brush. Yeah, it's very affordable for me and it's accessible in my country, and so that's what I use. And you should also check if maybe in your country or your area there is a local manufacturer that's making something that can be very useful for the craft that you're making. This is a liner type of brush, and I use it usually to paint lines, and mostly when I'm painting botanical themes and for stems or so. The liner is very useful because it can hold more water than the typical detailed brush that's very short, but it still is a synthetic bristle, so it can make sharp lines. Lastly, what I have in here, these are like some cheap and really very old synthetic brushes. These bristles are even split, so I no longer use them for painting. I just use them to clean something or to lift the pigment off of the page. So these are like the helper tools more than brushes being actually used for watercolor painting. Another type of synthetic brushes that I bought in a store that's called Flying Tiger. I think they had a set of 5 of these. Ah, this is another one that's untouched for about 3 euros. So there's like they're not branded, they're barely comprehensively numbered, but they're so much fun to paint with. And there's a lot of brands or a lot of stores that have these cheap sets available, and some of them are really not too crappy. The same goes for them as I've explained over here. Brush will usually hold its form for just a while and then it will split. You won't be able to get the nice details and the nice touch with them anymore. Something very similar are the synthetic brushes from Daler Rowney. I also bought a set very cheaply, a set of 5 brushes, and they were similarly very useful. Only after a while the hair split and they are no longer as useful for watercolor, but I still can use them for acrylics or something. So those are all the brushes that I take with me everywhere in my brush case. And there are 2 more brushes that don't fit into my brush case, and those are the Hake. These are the Hake by Pro Arte. I think I ordered them from Jackson's Art Supplies years ago. One is large and one is small. They usually don't have like typical numbering. They have large, small and medium. Usually if I work on a paper that needs to be completely wet before I start, or if you like to stretch your paper beforehand, then the large Hake brush comes in real handy. It works better than if you use the largest round brush because it can be quicker in covering the whole area with water. I also use it to create the expressive brush strokes with watercolor paint. However, I only keep them in my studio. The great thing about this type of brush is that you'll probably only have to get them once in your life. I think I have them over 8 years or so, and they don't get damaged. They can be at your service anytime that you need them. So yeah, these are the brushes that I like, that I use. I also have a lot of brushes aside that I bought that did not work for different reasons, and I might do another video showing you those so that you don't spend your money on something that might not work. Let me know if this video was helpful to you in any way, and you can obviously ask questions in the comments if I did not cover something important. I will try to find names or maybe even links to some of these and put them in the description. But try to search and ask for the watercolor brushes at your local art supply stores. If you have that option to visit an art supply store locally, then it's probably best if you do that, because you can hold the brush in your hands and try it out, and you can also support your local art supply store, that we all should do right now. Of course, that if you have no other choice, then it's great to be able to order this stuff online. Alright, so I'll see you soon, maybe next week, and I'm looking forward to do some painting with these. Have a great week, and I'll see you soon. Bye!